Obama administration saying the greatest threats to national security and U.S. businesses could be cyber attacks. Eamon Javers has the latest from Washington, D.C. Eamon.
Good morning, Melissa. Well, I'm here outside the Center for Strategic and International Studies in downtown Washington, where some of the administration's top cybersecurity experts are briefing industry, trade, and think tank folks here on what the rollout is going to be, following up now on the president's executive order that he announced on cybersecurity back during the State of the Union earlier in the week. The White House's top cyber guru talked to this group this morning about just the scope and the frightening scale of these attacks. Take a listen.
So the threat is becoming more sophisticated, and it's becoming more dangerous. We're moving up the threat spectrum from simply the internet equivalent of graffiti up to what you see what happened to Saudi Aramco this past summer with actual destructive impact.
And what he's talking about there in that attack on Saudi Aramco, officials said it was a months-long attack on the Saudi Arabian oil company that was designed to cut oil production and sale. That was something that raised eyebrows around the world, that hackers might have the ability to do that and to keep up an attack for such a sustained period. Now, experts think that that was a state-sponsored attack, but nobody is naming the country that might have been involved behind that attack. And guys, the sense here is that these White House officials and administration officials are very, very eager to avoid using the word regulation. They want to say standards. They want to talk about a framework. They want to talk about cooperating with the private sector. They don't want to give companies the impression this is going to be something mandated from the top down. They want companies really to buy into this effort to kind of coordinate all of the U.S. federal cybersecurity under one umbrella, so to speak, but not to mandate anything. They think companies might be resistant to that, Carl.
Yeah, you know, Eamon, it's David. There are obviously a number of threats here, and you're talking a lot about the threat of cyber attacks in terms of the infrastructure of our country and what could be done. We've also reported a lot on Cnbc on the threat of espionage of U.S. corporations, but you point out this unwillingness, to a certain extent it seems at least, to share information, concerns about the privacy of these companies. How far along is the administration in making inroads on that with its latest initiative?
Well, one of the issues that they raised here is just the basic data gathering that has to go into this process. In fact, they said that companies can't really get insurance yet on cybersecurity threats because there's no data for insurance companies to figure out how often they happen and therefore how to price that insurance product. One of the things they're talking about at this conference this morning is being able to get that data out into the private sector, out of the government into the private sector, and allow the government to tell companies what it knows about how often these attacks are happening. And then companies can start in a private sector, free market kind of a way to respond to that, and insurance is just one of the ways in which they would do it.
Eamon, isn't the bigger issue here that under the present law, companies are exempt from the fallout of a major cyber attack because it would be considered effectively an act of war? Don't you need to change that so that the CEOs have liability, or the company has liability, and therefore there is a cost-benefit in them investing in it more heavily?
Yeah, and actually what they're talking about here is proposing legislation that Congress would have to work on that would actually give companies more, what they're calling limited liabilities here in the case of cyber attacks, and that way they'd be more willing to come forward and cooperate with the government. A lot of this is about the government encouraging companies to sort of come out of the shadows here and talk to them about what's really happening. That's the challenge here. A lot of companies don't want to admit the degree to which they are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks because it opens them up to criticism and a lot of expense in terms of revamping their IT infrastructure.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, Eamon. Appreciate that. Eamon Javers in Washington. And keeping on that subject, turns out one of the prime targets of cyber attacks, largely mobile devices and e-commerce. Our John Ford's in San Jose today with more on that. Hey, John.
Hey, Carl. Yeah, we all know hackers are increasingly active and that they've turned professional. They're not just taking down websites for bragging rights. More and more, they're redefining organized crime. Numbers out this week from Trustwave, a security firm, give a glimpse at how the problem's evolving. A couple of big headlines, and then we'll drill down. One, retail stores were the target of choice in 2012. Two, attacks on smartphones were up 400%. Okay, so retail breaches were up 15% among the incidents Trustwave tracked. Why? Well, urban legend says Willie Sutton robbed banks because that's where the money is. Hackers robbed stores for the same reason, and because banks have better data security. 3 years ago, hotels were harder hit, but they've improved security a bit, and there are just more credit card numbers to steal at stores. A lot of these stores are so unprepared, it took more than 3 months before the majority even realized they'd been hacked. Now, on to phones. One popular attack involves tricking users, mostly of Android phones, into downloading a fake version of an app that sends text messages to a premium rate service. But there are other attacks that focus on sucking the contact information out of a phone. Security experts I talked to say this is just the beginning of a new wave of mobile attacks. And just to put a number on this, about $12.5 billion in estimated losses in 2011 from hacking, about 171 million just from a Sony hack that we remember, guys. Back to you.
John, when people ask you, should I do mobile banking? Should I subscribe to wireless at a hotel room? What do you tell them?
Well, the wireless at a hotel room thing, I like to try to bring along a MiFi or something like that, where I've got my own connection to the cellular network. That's a bit more secure. And, you know, you got to be careful surfing around on these e-commerce sites that aren't top tier, not so much your Amazons and eBays with the names you might not have heard of. Use a service like PayPal on those. It's a bit more secure than maybe their own credit card system.
Yeah. We got a lot of skeptical anchors over here.
I mean, two anchors have done cybersecurity documentaries, so public Wi-Fi is, you should not be on.
David, you actually have a separate
That's what I said. No public Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Bring
exactly.
your own
Listen,
Wi-Fi.
David actually
I had former guys in the
network.
Right, sorry, John, to cut you off. I had former senior guys at the FBI, I'm not going to say who they are, off camera say, the cameraman actually said, would you do online banking? And he said, no.
We spent $50 at Best Buy, set up a laptop and an antenna in Times Square where there's public Wi-Fi, and we were able to determine just the activity around us. We could see that somebody was changing their status on Facebook, somebody was checking their online banking account. That's what happens when you use a public Wi-Fi. Just be very careful.
Absolutely. Google picked that stuff up by accident with their, well, supposedly by accident. I don't know. They say it was an accident. We'll take them at their word. With their Street View trucks, you can just drive by and pick that stuff up.
Yeah. I guess with every convenience comes risk. That's for sure, man. John, thanks a lot. We'll see you later.